What's up, lore masters? When looking at the designs of Starfleet throughout the different eras, it's intriguing to see how current era ships would be designed based on the few decades that had come before them. Essentially, Starfleet would not learn lessons, but just go with how they felt things were going at the time. This is going to be a high-level breakdown of Starfleet ships. If it's popular, I may get more technical in the future. In order to really understand how the Starfleet Corps of Engineers constructed their vessels, we need to analyze the designs of the founding members, namely the Tellarites, Andorians, Vulcans, and humans. Looking at the technology of 2151, we don't have definitive evidence, but based on dialogue as well as the combat scenes in Enterprise, along with the clues given in Discovery, TNG, and DS9, it is likely that the Vulcans were the most powerful species in the Alpha Quadrant at that time. At least between the four that we'll be discussing. The Andorians would be a close second, ultimately able to rival the Vulcans for dominance of the Alpha Quadrant itself. The Tellarites would of course be third, with the humans a very distant fourth. Ironically, even though the Vulcans and Andorians were extremely antagonistic to each other, they were ultimately two sides of the same coin. The two species would have powerful weapons as well as advanced warp technology and no compunction about using them if needed. There is no direct evidence, but I do wonder if the design of the Andorian ships were specifically constructed as a response to that of their Vulcan counterparts. As stated, the four powers would join initially to form the Coalition of Planets and ultimately the United Federation of Planets. This would lead to the formation of Starfleet, an entity created to advance the sciences of the Federation as well as to provide for the common defense. Let's pause here a moment and discuss the formation of Starfleet and the usage of the United Earth's designs over that of the other races. There are a few YouTubers with varying audience members who think Starfleet is somehow an ally of the Federation and was not created by it. I guess those channels, some of them dedicated to Trek, have never watched Star Trek V: The Final Frontier, the Discovery episode Such Sweet Sorrow Part 2, or TNG's Q-Who. To be fair, those aren't very well-known instances in Trek, so I get how they might not be able to know of them. However, that popular myth aside, Starfleet was definitively formed by the Federation. It still doesn't explain why the humans would get such special treatment. I do have a bit of a theory here. As we see in Star Trek's Enterprise, the Alpha Quadrant was a pretty big powder keg. The races of the galaxy could not come together, even for their own defense. That was until humanity entered into the fray. The United Earth was able to barter peace and bring an alliance of Vulcans, Andorians, and even Tellarites together. Given the species' ability to create communities and their friendships with the Andorians and Vulcans, I could see the others giving special dispensation to the humans, opting to keep the hulls of the Terrans as well as the name they had used when they were just the United Earth. This would also help with any animosity between the Vulcans and Andorians. Additionally, given some of the episodes we see, I think it's likely that these older designs and the designs of the individual races would still exist. For all intents and purposes, Starfleet was the federalized representation of the Federation. They were effectively the military of that area of space, while the individual planets would work with their own ships as militia, courier, and trade. Planets keeping their own defenses could also be utilized as an argument for pacifists in the Federation Council to claim that Starfleet was just a science division, and thus not something meant to enforce the will of the various members. Interestingly, there is some evidence that even though Starfleet was the combined might of the various species, the way Starfleet was initially conceived more worked like a confederation, where each individual species would contribute specific parts, but possibly hold back on others. Weapon systems may be created and developed by one species, like the Andorians, while impulse and defensive systems, like shields, would be constructed by another, say the Vulcans. Also, while it would only be these four species initially, the presence of other world representatives at the formation of the Coalition and then the Federation seems to indicate that the Federation itself initially either had allies or protectorates. This could indicate that the different technologies would also come from other sources, not just related to the founding members. In the end, the formation of the Federation effectively creates peace for a time that had not been seen before. It would also mean that effectively there would be three major powers in the Alpha and Beta quadrants, which would include the United Federation of Planets, Romulan Star Empire, as well as the Klingon Empire. There are other powers that could challenge these governments, of course, but not be able to match the might of the individual nations. It would be because of this peace that the largely militarized designs of the four powers would give way to more scientific pursuits, as well as a focus on technology over practicality. Some confrontations would exist, Sure, but for roughly 95 years, Starfleet wouldn't be challenged, nor have to fight any type of real war. Effectively, the officers from the different races, as well as Starfleet itself, would lose the lessons that they learned that formed the Federation. This would be seen quite clearly during the Federation-Klingon War of 2256 and 2257. Starfleet, at this time, designed ships that were basically modern marvels, luxurious vessels with advanced technology that included holograms, sophisticated AI, and extensive science divisions. The Cardenas class, the Crossfield, the Ingle, the Malachowski, the Nimitz, and other vessels were the pride of the fleet. All of these designs were large, shiny, and would absolutely fail to the might of the Klingon Empire that generally had vessels that were older than what they were, but somehow tougher. It's even telling that the Constitution-class vessel, the most powerful and advanced ship of the fleet, one that would still be a vessel that was hard to rival over a decade later, is disabled and made inoperable due to the new technology. Specifically the hologram tech, which would be stripped out and never used again on the USS Enterprise by order of Captain Pike. While the Federation-Klingon War was technically a victory for Starfleet, the results being a Klingon surrender, this war would have a devastating impact upon Starfleet and its ethos. We would not only see the regression of technology, but more of a focus on taking science vessels and arming them to the teeth so they could be utilized for civilian assistance as well as defense of the core. It is exceptionally evident in the ship designs of the 2250s. Just look at some of them known for this era, among them being the Constitution class, as I've mentioned, as well as the Miranda. Both of these vessels are marked by their ability to fight the Klingon Empire, the largest antagonist of the Federation at the time. To be fair, there would be some vessels that were not able to exist in any combat scenario, including the Oberth class. But these were far and in between. Interestingly, it would be this era, the era where combat ships daylighted as science vessels, that the road to the quote-unquote golden age of the Federation would be forged. This would be the time of the Klingon Cold War in which Starfleet would ultimately win at the destruction of Praxis. Praxis being the moon of the homeworld of the Klingons at the time. After this, thanks to Spock and others, a lot of the military assets of Starfleet would be dismantled. This would cause a shift in the culture of the Federation, and the cultural shift would ultimately impact Starfleet as well. The slow fade from military to basically science and exploration can be seen in designs such as the Ambassador class, which would still be able to pack a punch but was more luxurious and one that wasn't as focused on defending the Federation. The Golden Age would be best represented in the Galaxy-class starship, a vessel that is basically an apartment in space and was created for comfort. The vessel would be so weak that even an ancient bird of prey would be able to destroy the flagship, this even after the vessel had been upgraded. There would be a few other designs, like the Nebula class, but it's possibly telling that the bulk of the fleet that we see appears to be older designs like the Excelsior and aforementioned Miranda, both vessels being heavyweights of their time and defended the Federation adequately. During the time of the Galaxy-class starship, there would still be conflicts, of course, like the Cardassian border wars and Zinkethi conflicts, but nothing that seriously threatened the Federation. All of this would change, however, when the Romulan Star Empire roused from behind their borders and began to challenge Federation supremacy. The largest impact would be the quote-unquote war with the Borg and the loss of dozens of ships at Wolf 359. It would be here that Starfleet engineers, like Benjamin Sisko, would design ships made specifically for war. I referenced to you the Defiant class that most people know. There has been discussion of some weapons and designs to combat the Borg before Wolf 359, but unfortunately none of it came to fruition and we can't be sure what they were trying to build. It is speculated that designs like the Intrepid, Acura, and Steamrunner were thought up at the same time, but there's no way for us to know. I will say though that this does seem like a logical assumption, but there's no real canon evidence of it. However, we would definitively see a shift back to a more militaristic style during the Dominion Cold War around 2374. This would finally be a mix of luxury, innovation, and military, bringing everything together. As stated, you would have the Intrepid-class starship, the Acura, the Steamrunner, and even the Sovereign. These vessels would be heavyweights, like their counterparts in the 23rd century, with the style and accommodation of the Discovery and Galaxy-class eras. Even ships that were more scientific than militaristic, like the Nova class, still had defensive weapons and options to defend themselves. It would be a relief that the Starfleet Corps of Engineers weren't basing it on the times they were in, but trying to take everything they had learned before and make the best ships they could. The interesting piece in looking over and discussing these designs and methodologies is analyzing the soul of the Federation. The Federation was forged in blood only to have its Starfleet become gluttonous. The near destruction from the Klingon War would lead into a semi-dystopia for history to only repeat itself. Fortunately, it would only take the Borg and the Dominion for them to finally learn their lessons. Though, if they've truly learned it, we'll have to wait and see in Star Trek Picard to find out. But all of these are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next Lore Reloaded.